Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you might be calling in from. Susan, with that beautiful doppled sunlight again, it always just is, it's glorious.
It's lovely.
Hello, Emma.
Hey, everyone. Hi, good to see you.
Good to see you.
And Christopher.
Hello, everyone.
And Indy.
Good morning.
So welcome to the Threshold Lab. You found yourself in a member meetup today. It's also an open house session. So the last member meetup of the month, we open up for potential prospects or for anybody who wants to come in and learn a little bit more about what we're doing here in the lab. I would imagine we might have a few more people join us as the call moves on, but just wanted to orient you to that as a little special part of today. I've gone ahead and added a slide here just for the beginning of the call to structure a little bit as we're making our approach through this time, especially if someone were new here, to kind of understand what we do here in the Threshold Lab, what these member meetups are like, and how they are really driven by the energy and the requests and the needs of the community who shows up here on a given day. So I like to think of it in 3 acts, really, where we get to come into the space to check in, then allow wants or needs or requests to bubble up in our conversation. From that, we might decide on a couple of breakout rooms that would help facilitate deeper conversation or sharing in some areas that are needed. And then as part of a checkout process, just touching base on what was important today and identifying or even articulating any shifts in our energy or in our minds or hearts as we are exiting the space and entering further into the week. So just want to, let me get Robert, he just popped in the room. Just want to ask, where do you find yourself today as you enter the lab?
Perhaps I start. So this is my first Threshold Lab member event. I was able to join a few days ago, and I'm very happy to be part of this community. I'm very excited about this. I find myself having a good day. I was able to meet a new coaching client for whom I offer pro bono coaching, a young female leader in Syria who has an organization supporting women get education. And it was just extraordinary to meet this young, powerful, energetic, and committed visionary person, to be supporting her on the coaching journey. That's an incredible privilege. I myself are part of this ID program and recently felt that I needed to give it a pause because my partner was diagnosed, if you will, with late-stage cancer, and that really disrupted my life in significant ways. And I'm trying to find my way back to a sense of normality as I'm wanting to progress with the ID program as well. And I felt it would be a great opportunity to, at the same time, expand my network and seek contacts with whom I might collaborate on one or other issue that I would like to develop further. So this is what I bring to today. Thank you.
Thank you for being here, Christopher.
Indigo here. I'm in a time of adjustment with a new job that's 4 10s, 10 hours, 4 days a week. And the lusciousness of having 3 days off in a row. And the schedule on the days I'm working really squishing down time I've had for walking the dogs and exercising. And this week in particular is a very weird week. My days off are split and I have half days of work because of orientation. And it's been rich with my being both the client and the coach for practice for narrative coaching. I have friends I'm really close with, a tight circle, and I regularly meet with them, and I don't want to lose that. But I'm feeling just out of balance right now until I get oriented to what my circumstances now. I'm grateful for the job. I'm working from home. It's absolutely amazing to get off shift and not have to drive home. My doggies and housemate are there, but our meals are disrupted. We're on different schedules. And so it's just all topsy-turvy right now. I know it'll shake out, but I'm a little grumpy and fuzzy.
So I can share. I'm sort of in between Christopher and Indigo and sitting with possibilities within the context of constraint and the good, the bad, the uncomfortableness of it. Lots to think about.
I'll share that I find myself having a bit more of a nervous energy today as I arrive in the lab than I have on previous calls, and I know that it's because I brought a case story in progress to share some elements with the group today, and it feels both exciting and vulnerable, and it's not the exact articulation of where I imagine it in my heart and mind, but it's a start, and so I think that I'm just feeling that that anticipation of bringing something into the world in a new way and holding it up and looking at it and spinning it around and asking other people, what do you see with it? So
Hmm. 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 Well, I can check in to go on. So I've been musing these last couple of days about how does one make a decision in these times, which seems like an elemental question, an obvious question. You think after all these years I would have figured that out, and I realize at the moment I haven't figured that out in a way that, and some of the variables that would have been kind of my go-to reference points for decisions are in motion. They're less certain, they're less known. And so I've been noticing myself go to ground more often. So in this case, it was working on my front yard, literally. And I know that when I do that, it's because I'm trying to connect to something I can't quite find yet. And the dirt is often the place I go do that. So I was hoping to wake up this morning with this great revelation, and I just woke up and had my coffee and the day started and the revelation has not come. But I'm just aware of, what it's like to try to decide in these times and how different that feels in a way that I had not appreciated before. Yeah.
I can share.
Mm.
I had no idea what I was going to say, and something popped into my head. I don't know if you recall the Oscar Wilde thing at Customs once when he said, "I have nothing to declare but my genius." Now, I'm using the word. I'm using the word, however, in the mythological sense.
Mm.
It just seemed appropriate because I feel quite buoyant today,
Mm.
which is an unusual state for me to find myself in of late. So I'm going with it. And of course, mythologically, the genius in Roman mythology, the genius was the spirit which is in all of us and around us and in the world. And there were genii for everything, for doorways and lintels and windows and all sorts of things. So I guess I'm sitting in a sense of supported possibility. I could probably find a more elevated way of saying that, but that seems to fit the bill just for the moment.
Mm.
Thank you.
Mm. Thanks. Mm.
I can go next. So I'm currently in a hotel, staycationing for a few days. And it's great because it's really in the middle of greeneries and nothing much, which is very rare in Singapore. And really enjoying a lot of silence and really just being on my own and solitude, which I never really looked for in the past. I think I was always looking for company and being surrounded. So learning to just be and doing long walks, journaling a lot, and putting things into perspective. So that's been quite helpful. And I was hesitating whether I should come to the lab today. Should I have a clear break and know, well, not that I consider the lab work, but and then I thought, well, let me just join and say hi to friends. But yeah, that's where I'm at now. And yeah, it's very rejuvenating and resourcing. Mm.
Mm.
Go. Thank you everyone for sharing. So I'm coming in with two things today. The first one is around when I took narrative coaching, I didn't have any aspirations to coach, and I'm finding myself coaching for colleagues and things like that now. So it's very interesting that I've needed. It's very interesting to me that I was gathering all of those skills, and I'm needing it now. So some part of me must have known that I was going to be doing some of this work. So I'm quite happy about that, about how that's worked out. And the second thing that I'm coming in with is there is history being made worldwide at this time. The Pope has visited Canada. He is in Canada and is making apologies, a more fuller apology. And so my heart is with survivors of residential schools and children, my parents, grandparents, and family members who all had their childhoods sacrificed. So my heart is with them today. So I am leaning a bit on Robert's buoyancy to get me through this time, this heaviness, this time of heaviness. Yeah, thank you, Miigwech.
If you'll permit me, I'm going to stop sharing this slide such that as we begin the next part of the call, we can, see each other a bit more fully and, be present with the conversation around what are we needing from today and this space and gathering. I thank everybody for the check-in and for sharing what you did and how you are as you arrive. And wondering if anybody's coming in with a need or a request for this time, this space, this community today.
I'm not very good at pauses, so what I could share is perhaps that I've recently been asked to join ongoing efforts of a local initiative here in Taiwan to help develop a learning center for young students who are looking for additional support when they intend to go on an international career. So initially it was supposed to be an alternative university where students were taking the center stage of building their own curriculum with partner organizations, and that wasn't approved by the the Ministry of Education. So now in the process of finding a new identity and maybe gearing it towards more marketability and a career abroad, because that's what many Taiwanese want to do. And while there's all this education discussion about the education itself going on, I'm quite involved, or I'm wanting to get myself involved in the support structures of such initiative. One of it being offering these young students with some kind of community, some kind of coaching support that takes not just the learning and skill acquisition at the center, but also personal development. And I find that quite an interesting discussion. I'm surrounded by people who have worked in universities, have a very different way of thinking. And I'm also meeting here with different coaches who come from different angles and parts of walks of life. And I guess that can be something I would like perhaps to share and write about, maybe in this forum, and just see what happens if I post it.
Mm. And would you like to host a conversation about that today, Christopher, with this group?
Perhaps not today, because I don't know much about it yet.
Okay.
But that's a wonderful invitation. I had already told them that I might be able to kind of pull in some more wisdom from other places of the world who have been involved. I know, Emily, that you have done similar work. I actually provided them with your website for them to have a look at. So I was hoping that maybe there's a way to have a conversation around this, but at the moment it's just a very, very early stage. And yeah, so I'm kind of fighting for my space to do something a little bit different.
I guess my question was more for you, Christopher, in terms of your own journey with this. Is there anything you would like to host in terms of a conversation for you at this stage of the journey? And if not, that's fine too.
Yeah, I wouldn't even know how to respond to that. Yeah.
Okay.
But I thank you. Gladly at another time. Thank you, David.
And Christopher, I'm going to share a link here in the chat, and it's to a spreadsheet for the lab. And essentially, this is just a way for us to keep track of potential follow-ups or things that we want to touch base on in the future. So if you find yourself with questions or wanting to maybe hold or host a conversation, feel free to add your name to one of the days. It lets other people know, something to look forward to or something going on in the lab, and particularly people who have background or interest in similar areas or in education might find that to be a really fruitful discussion.
Amazing. Yeah, I will. Thank you.
Absolutely. I did hear a lot of resonance in what you shared. I was hearing it.
Maybe if I can build on what you've shared, Christopher, and I think I've also shared on that spreadsheet. For me, one question that often keeps coming is in the adult development field, how does one best foster, create learning or learning environment for adults to develop? And for me, it's a little bit, it's a bit simplistic, but it's a bit of a toggle between get them to experience in the moment and also help provide explanation so that they can be enticed to try and, appease the brain wanting to make meaning of things. And so I'm always interested in, well, not always, but I'm interested today to kind of unpack with some of you perhaps when is it most appropriate, context, situation, scenarios perhaps where yeah, perhaps when we need to hold back explanation and do more of experience and vice versa.
Mm.
Mm.
I can share that for me in the classroom. I host a very project-based experiential learning curriculum as part of a media communications Bachelor of Science at a university in Orlando, Florida. And the curriculum is such that students, they develop a project for themselves at the start of the month. And there aren't many parameters that get put on it other than that they need to link it back to their career aspiration or what they know of that at this time, with the caveat that you're learning and growing and going through an educational sequence, and that might change, and know that might change, and that's okay. That when you say this is what I'm interested in for this term or this month or this project, that you're not setting it in stone, to create a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? Safety, playfulness, not making a right or wrong decision, but just an exploration of a curiosity. The approach was, this approach was really a response to having students come into a classroom with very diverse interests and aspirations in the media communication field, such that rigidly defining what they did or how we would spend our collective time would not speak to their individual wants, desires, or even attend to their individual level or point of readiness. So for me in this space, I've got, let's say, 30 different students working on 30 very different things. And so much of their learning comes from making the implicit more explicit with themselves and with their process. We talk a lot about teasing out the process and not just a focus on product. What is the story of what's happening here is where we're spending a lot of time. And you asked, Emma, and kind of this tangent that I've gone on was to circle around to where do I come in and point out where learning is happening. Oftentimes, they're having this experience, they're narrating what's going on, where they're having problems, where they're pivoting or having these subtle shifts. And they're hearing each other's stories. And sometimes in that process, there is an opportunity, I call it, I turn on my teacher spotlight and I mimic like putting a flashlight above, above my head and say, okay, I've got to pull out the teacher spotlight. And I say, I hear you saying this, and, did everybody hear so-and-so, say this thing, and just tease out a moment of where something bigger is happening, but hasn't quite been, hasn't landed in that place yet for the student. But mostly it is through their own ability to articulate the path of growth and development.
Thank you, Emily. That's very useful.
How about others? Are there other curiosities or needs for our breakout room time today? Conversations?
I'm really interested in your share, Emily, and the case story. Yeah, lots of possibilities.
I would be happy to offer that either as a breakout, or if there aren't any other conversations that are boiling up. We could do it. We could just stay in the shared group as well, whatever the need is.
What's coming to mind for me, Emily, is I think we probably could just stay in one group, but I'm just really curious about weaving this sort of learning thread for us as we listen to and participate in your case study. And I have two questions I'm sitting with in this conversation. One is, like, how do we know when learning actually happens? And what is it? And I think that's just really fascinating. And, you know, kind of what is our own curiosity about what we could learn from your case study, and how do we know we're learning that? And I just find it a really fascinating question. The other one, which is takes us a bit beyond this, but maybe not. I'm going to go thinking of Susan, your comment. I hadn't really thought of it quite this way, but you think about efforts for reconciliation, for recognition, for these really intense pieces of our past, which are being sort of flung into our present by taking down statues, by seeking reparations, for all these things to honor and acknowledge and process the trauma of the past for many. And then you think about the traumas we imagine in our future, and you think there's a lot of pressure on now, on this moment, to hold these spaces for these massive energies. And yeah, and so maybe in a microcosm, your case study is a little bit about how do we manage the now of being in these projects when there's so much other energy that's informing them that we don't often get to talk about. And I just think it's not to be answered today. I was just realizing that and responding to some of your check-ins and feeling that even in myself, there's a lot of past and future stuff that's sort of in my life at the moment. And it's a lot to hold in a way that it never felt that way before. So I'm just really curious about that. How do we be in the now with what we're trying to do?
Thank you for those thoughts. I have a need to be in my body rather than in case study mode at this time. So I'm just going to propose a breakout room for processing that now in the context of body. So I'd like to move, and if anybody would like to move with me, that would be really great.
Emily, are you going to create the rooms? Do you want me to create the rooms?
I can do it, David. So
Okay.
let's see here. I will create 2 rooms, and everyone can choose their own. The first one we'll just say is a case story. And the second one we'll call movement. Okay. And
Welcome back. So what did you take from your conversations? I would ask what you learned, but that would be sort of a tricky question. So.
I think we didn't have enough time.
Okay.
But if we I mean, I would love to have asked you, Emily, how it felt to share this with you.
Mm.
Mm.
Yeah,
And
me too.
Emily,
Thank you. Thank you for the question, Emma. Because even as I was preparing to share this, even as I put my name on the spreadsheet, a week ago, it felt like putting myself on the hook for something that was important to me, but that I have struggled with finding the words to talk about, because it was big and it meant a lot, and it still does. And it's, David, sometimes you talk about, well, like, how do you know what occurred or what the outcome was, or, when it's just so fresh, like you go through this experience, you don't have the words. It's not until, sometimes much later that you're able to see it in a different light or within context, or find the articulation that feels like truth. And so for me, the event that I shared was over nearly a year ago. And I'm still finding new ways to describe it. I'm still finding new ways. And I think that part of my hesitation, just to share in this space with colleagues, is not wanting to bring anything to the table that doesn't feel fully formed. And the vulnerability in saying, I don't know if this is the right way. I don't know if I'm answering the questions that you would have. All I know is that this is a starting point. And even as I was putting I'll share a link in the chat for those who weren't in the room, but it's just a link to a web page that I created that tells a little bit of the story that we discussed. But even as I was building this, I felt oftentimes like wanting to jump off, like wanting to to abandon the task, because it felt like too much or too big. And I had to really get into some moments of self-talk around just make it a starting place. Just find the first few words, and then perhaps knowing this group, knowing the questions in the incredible space that you all hold, trusting that just sharing with you would help me get to the next best place, but also aware too that the questions that you would have would help me, would help illuminate a path for me.
Emily, I was appreciating, of course, it got clipped short, but you got to touch upon when I asked what was the major difference before and after, not just the pandemic, but this experience that you had helped bring forward for that whole group, was the shift in the way you approach your own work. And what I also saw and heard in that was your permission to do so, in spite of it sometimes casting you in the role of the different one or the outsider that wasn't jumping right back into the same prior structure and trying to recapture what had been. Something shifted in you that allowed you to invite others to explore how it is now.
Indigo, I feel like you articulated really what my journey was with ID, because in what I'm doing at school, could see a very clear connection between ID and what I was doing organizationally or departmentally in that space. For me, the work and the growth throughout that program was very personal, and the way that you just described it felt like truth. So thank you for those words.
You're welcome.
Hmm.
I will share too that it was very special, Emma, that you were in attendance for my my case story, my first attempt at a case story share here, because really it was your encouragement and what you heard and saw in some of our early conversations that led me to ID. You know, I still consider it to be one of the most transformative experiences that I've ever had. So
Mhm.
thank you for what you heard and how you held all of that early on.
Mhm. Mhm. I'm curious for you, Emily. So when you sort of introduced your experience of putting your name on the list and tried to imagine kind of where am I in my journey, and like, what did you discover for yourself as a result of being in this small group about kind of where you are in your journey with yourself around this case?
Hmm. My thoughts are swirling and get kind of in a meta state of seeing my own seeing my own development and path and recognizing a few things, just where my individual point of readiness was, what it feels like to feel safe, and what is invited in the safety of this space, to not have to have it be perfect or fully figured out. But the other part about it is a certain kind of accountability that that was needed to help me get an idea, or at least a kernel of an idea, or a few words out of my head and heart and into a space that I could show someone else. And I really am appreciative of the lab for that kind of it's structure and accountability. It's safety, structure, and accountability to bring something in front of a group of individuals who can be so generous in their presence and attention, and curiosity.
Yeah. I think that's in part why I think of them as case stories as opposed to case studies, because stories are always in motion, they're always evolving. I was thinking about the reports that I have to write every year for the Aboriginal Leadership Project in Australia, and we're trying to appease funders and readers who have certain needs of the report. Capturing authentically the experience of 30 participants from 30 different Aboriginal communities, 3 coaches, 4 bureaucratic staff members, 1,500 hours of contact, and they want me to capture all that in 20 pages and have it be perfect. And I just think, one of the things from ID that, what's coming up for me and hearing your story is, I think there's just a whole different way of thinking about what does it mean to document or to report or to share. There is no perfection. It's physically impossible to create a perfect report. I've tried, and it just darn near did my head in. And so now it's more like I just look at it as a snapshot in a movie, or you stand in the river for a few minutes and describe your experience. The river just flows on. Yeah, I'm hoping that this will be a great example for the kind of things we're looking for from others. It's just a moment in time and space, and your report on what's happening for you. Yeah.
If I may, I'm really curious to hear
Yeah.
from Susan and
Yeah.
and being in your body.
Yeah.
Just a few minutes we have together. How was it for you?
Inviting that that share. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It started off, kind of, nervous energy or just the need to move, and then we got talking about. Robert joined me, and so Robert can, if you want to share some of yours in a minute there, but we started talking about pendulums, right? How things can swing from one side to the other side, and until it starts to gradually find its middle on its own, whether it'll go there in a straightforward manner or whether it'll kind of spiral in a figure eight kind of manner. However way, we'll just sort of find that middle ground. So that was what I was doing. Most of the big movements. I think Robert might have been doing some more subtle movements. So I guess that would wrap up what I experienced. And we also talked about our shared interest and that we discovered we're both actors. So background in theater for both of us. And I heard, Indigo, you used the phrase "cast in the role," and that kind of kind of riffed on our conversation in a way. And that got me thinking, it's like, okay, well, what character is the person that we're talking to assigning us at any given moment? So Indigo, thank you for even though you didn't intentionally mean to give me that thought, but it certainly inspired that piece.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you for asking, Emma.
I just add that it was a delightful 35 minutes spent. It was lightly held and full of humor, and there was talk of embodiment, well, quite literally, but also what that means as well, and how the body, how as coaches perhaps we're not just hearing the words that people speak. We're not just hearing the manner in which they speak. We're not just hearing the metaphors that they produce, but we're also, or should be, aware of what their body's telling us, because quite frequently the body tells a different story to the voice, and the body's the one that should be believed. It betrays. The body betrays us when we're talking shit, basically, sometimes.
And the wonder is when you find your body and your mouth in agreement, which can happen sometimes, which is very happy.
Robert, I love that moment when you sat back in your chair and you found ease. I love that moment. I just wanted to tell you in front of
thank you. It was it was a momentary inventory. What Susan asked me what was going on in my body at that moment, and I said I'm feeling a little bit of an ache in my middle back, and quickly realized that what I needed to do was sit back in my chair because it's ergonomic, and it fixed it instantaneously. But yeah, that was a nice little moment of spontaneity. Il y a un ange qui passe.
I have one more thing to share from a previous conversation, Christopher. I apologize you weren't there at that, but I'll just fill you in really quickly. We were talking about peripheral vision and how Yeah, and so I played with that idea in an embodied way later, and I just took myself, and you might want to do this too, just taking your arms out and just seeing, like, how far out can you see your own arms, and just play with that until you can't see them anymore, and bring them back into focus, all the way up. It's like, you know, your arms and your hands are there, but even if you can't see them. So it's a really lovely way to play with peripheral vision in an embodied sense. So thank you for that inspiration from that conversation, David.
Mm. Mm. Mm.
I do want to,
check out.
yeah, I do want to honor the time, knowing that we're coming up on 90 minutes here. Anybody have anything they want to leave the space with?
I think what I appreciate is every time I attend one of these, I get the confirmation you're on the right trail. You don't know where it's going, but this is working for you. Trust. My body goes away happy, even if my brain is still fussing. So.
Well,
Thank
you
you,
all.
everyone. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Emma, enjoy your vacation.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to share as we part that one of the lab members, Lisa Merriman, is offering a session next week, but it's in the PM, and it's going just to be around celebrating movement progress wins in our lives and our coaching. So if I'll post that in our circle group, but just wanted to share it aloud with you here to know that that's going on if your schedule permits. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful day.
Thanks, Emily, for hosting.
Thank you.
Right.
Bye.
Bye.